Today, our dialogue guest is an old friend of us, Anna Melinda Gui. Anna is the Manila Times columnist and vice president of Asia Century Philippines Strategic Study Institute. Hello, Anna. Thank you for coming to our dialogue again.
Hi, Dr. Yan, and thank you again for inviting me to be part of this episode. And I think I'm very excited to discuss with you um, issues that really impacts the world at the moment. It impacts China to some extent, and of course, my country, the Philippines.
Thank you, Anna. Current ongoing US-Israel-Iran war. Well, it has been 24 days of this US-Iran war, and the US and the Israeli forces continue airstrikes targeting Iran, and Iran retaliated with missiles and drone attacks across Israel and also the GCC countries. So first of all, I would like to ask Anna, how do you see the current ongoing US-Israeli-Iran war?
That's a very interesting question, and I think this topic is very much relevant to everyone in the world at the moment, and we need to emphasize something here. First, the attack on Iran by Israel, and of course, Israel and the US axis. Everyone has to remember and should not forget the fact that this is illegal as far as international law is concerned. This is illegal and a violation of the United Nations Charter. It was unprovoked. There was no reason for the United States to attack Iran precisely because there is no intelligence information saying that, Iran will attack the mainland United States or even Iran will attack Israel for that matter. So these are things that needs to be laid ground. I mean, to be there, out there and explain because people may misunderstood that, there was just a war out of the blue. So I think these are very important. And one more thing I think that's very important, that is an attack on the sovereignty of Iran. That is really clear. And I think everyone that has a right mind and a right perspective in looking at international issues, especially military issues, on this and been talking about this. Unfortunate thing about this Iran US-Israel conflict, which is, as you've said, 24 days ongoing, and it's not even de-escalating; it's raging as we speak at the moment. Is the fact that there was an ongoing negotiation. Actually, Iran and the United States was in that negotiation referring to the nuclear program of Iran, and I think as far as Iran was concerned, it was something positive as far as they are concerned. But out of the blue, with in the middle of negotiation, the United States decided, of course, alongside Israel, to attack Iran. So this is now happening, and the thing that is very important to point out is what would be the impact and impact of this globally speaking, especially when you talk about oil, energy, and even other prices of goods in countries like mine, the Philippines, and also how the Middle East, strategic architecture will change after the war and how this will end. Because that is the most important question. What is the solution to this? Is there such a thing as a political solution, or they will just fight each other until the end and who will surrender because they are out of ammunition already? And how the United States will handle the exit of all this and how it is impacting countries in the region and even across the world, especially when you talk about energy. Because at the end of the day, we need to remember that the Gulf states or the Middle East in particular, these are oil producing countries, and Iran is also an oil producing countries, and the world is dependent on in this region when you talk about supply of oil. And now, as you can see, the Strait of Hormuz is already, well, it's not necessarily close, but it's, I mean, Iran said, like, only those friendly countries like China, Russia, and others can pass through. And if there would be some kind of transactions, it should be in RMB, which is in yuan, in Chinese currency, and unfriendly countries and allies of the United States, they would not allow. And unfortunately, my country, the Philippines, is a military ally of the United States in the context of the Mutual Defense Treaty. So, and to a certain extent, it impacts the Philippines. And right now, to be frank with you, my country is suffering from many economic adverse effect of the war as compounded by the existing economic problems that we have. So now prices of oil is going up, prices of goods is going up, everything is going up. And I don't even know if Marcos Jr. can handle this, to be frank with you, because we have also a lot of OFWs, what you call overseas Filipino workers, working in the Middle East, around 2 million. And this would impact the economy of the country because they are the bastion of what you call remittances, and our dollar reserves actually is very much dependent as well on the remittances of the OFWs, or overseas Filipino workers, working in different parts of the world, and one big chunk of it is in the Middle East, which is within the area where there is a conflict at the moment. So these are important, I think, as far as my country is concerned, as far as Iran and Israel conflict is concerned. I think these are very important points that needs to be raised in this kind of discussions that we have.
Yes. In terms of U.S. military allies, well, as you already mentioned, that the Philippine-U.S. military alliance has been framed as a pillar of the country's security. And during this war, the U.S.-Iran war, we see that Iran launched retaliatory missile and drone attacks against U.S. military sites and facilities across multiple GCC countries, including like Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain. So I'm thinking that in our region, currently the Philippines hosts 9 U.S. military bases under the EDCA. Do you think this what impact, security impact will there be for the Philippines as a U.S. military ally?
Oh, that's a very interesting question, and it's a very hot issue right now in my country because many Filipinos, many of my countrymen are aware of what's going on in the Middle East crisis. And of course, in the news, we can see that, Iran is targeting military facilities, US military facilities, Israel military facilities, even non-military facilities in areas or in countries that are so-called allies of the United States. And they have a lot of military installations and assets in these places. Because of course, we need to understand that from a military perspective, Iran's ballistic missiles will not reach secret weapons, But as far as I know, at the moment, based on my monitoring of the situation in the Middle East, as far as I know, Iran doesn't have that missile that will reach the US mainland. So military speaking, in terms of strategy, I think the target are the military bases in different parts of the Gulf or of the Middle East that could actually be used to retaliate or attack Iran. That's precisely understandable from a military perspective. So now it's happening, and my countrymen are seeing it. And this is like an eye opener for us because, as you have said, we have 9 EDCA bases by which the defense secretary and the armed forces of the Philippines are saying that these are not military bases, these are not U.S. military bases, but some kind of facilities for humanitarian assistance and disaster response. They're trying to package it that way. But everyone in my country understand, and every one of us know that EDCA bases are actually U.S. military bases. And there are pictures that would prove that. So now the thing here is it becomes an issue for everyone in the country precisely because they can see that if in any case there will be an spillover effect of the war and it escalate and it's not only anymore contained in the Middle East, we will be exposed. Now we're already exposed. Security exposure for us is already there, but we will be more exposed as a country given the 9 military bases of the United States through EDCA, or the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement with the United States, that maybe these EDCA sites will be subject to what you call retaliatory attacks coming from perceived enemy of the United States. And there's a lot of them, So that is also the problem for us. And of course, we are asking the government, what is your answer to this, particularly the Marcos Jr. government? How are you going to project the Philippines that it is not necessarily an enemy of any state, that is enemy of the Americans, enemies. So it's something to that effect. So, but of course, as you can see, the foreign policy of the current administration is very much leaning to the United States. Our military is very much influenced by the United States in many ways. And also, as you can see, there are a lot of deployments of troops right now going on in the Philippines. Even U.S. Navy ships are deployed in the Philippines. From my information, reports that are being thrown at me by many people, it seems also that military troops of the United States coming from Japan and even from other parts are being deployed in my country. I don't know why. Maybe from my country going to the Middle East, maybe that's a possibility. So in any case, two things. My country is, in terms of exposure, security, and military, it's very exposed because of the 9 EDCA sites. If you're a military strategist, when you map out, like for example, the military assets and bases of your enemy, the Philippine enemy, let us say I'm Iran and I'm looking at the whole picture and the global architecture of military bases in the world, Philippines definitely is part of it because you have the 9 EDCA sites. So in that sense, there's now an issue as to safety of the country, survival of the country, and at the same time, how we gonna make it sure and project to the world that we are not part of the so-called aggressive force of the United States, especially that we all know that the United States they're always the first one to attack a country. And it's always like that. If you look at the history of the United States since World War II, it's always like that. So that is also a challenge as far as our foreign affairs is concerned. Though I would admit, Dr. Yan, that in terms of immediate attack, let us say from Iran, I don't think we are at that situation. However, the problem is the escalation and the spillover effect. And also, if in any case, my country will be used through the EDCA sites and through US military bases there that would be used for refueling, for repositioning of military assets that can be used against Iran. And I think in terms of troops, and I think of many other military activities, because one thing that you have to remember, EDCA, or the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, basically states that the United States can reposition assets, military assets. And now we have long-range and mid-range missile system in the country. The Typhoon missile is deployed, and I heard that a mid-range missile system also be deployed in a matter of time. So these are things that are going on, and there's an upcoming, what you call military exercises between the United States and with Japan that will take place anytime soon. So I don't see this is good for us and optics wise, and I don't see this as something that would be beneficial for the Philippines when you talk about security and survival, because the 9 EDCA sites, basically, if you really look at it from a military perspective, the 9 EDCA sites are magnet for retaliation on any kind of military escalation that may take place in the context of Iran escalation and spillover effect, and even if there is something happening in the Indo-Pacific region as well. So at the end of the day, I don't agree with this, but it is a reality that my country is facing at the moment.
Yes, we do see that the United States is redeploying the components of the THAAD system and the Patriot missile system from South Korea to Middle East to strengthen its defense against these Iranian strikes. And also this moves, what many people think that these moves follows a heavy usage of air defense in the ongoing Iran conflict and highlighting a strained U.S. weapon stockpiles globally. So do you worry that the United States will also move the missiles in the Philippines to the Middle East? And also, do you think that what specific challenges does the government is facing when U.S. is bogged down in this Iran war? Can it still fulfill these obligations under the MDT, Mutual Defense Treaty, when a crisis occurred in the South China Sea?
That's a really a very interesting question. First is, if in any case, I'm worried that there would be a redeployment of those missile systems that be deployed already in the Philippines. To be very frank with you, they can do so. They should just take it out of my country, all the troops, all the weapons that they have, the US weapons, all the US troops, and even all the missile system. If they can take it out of my country, that's better for us, really. To be very frank, from a rational point of view, looking at the Philippines as a state, and the rational thinking always, if you are, let us say, a Filipino or a leader of a country, you would want your country to survive and to be safe. So these weapons that we have from the United States deployed in the country are not good for us. So if they want to reshift it to the Middle East, so be it. I'll be very happy about it. So in a way, we are kind of, the perception of us being part of the global military architecture of the Philippines, I think, will be to a certain extent lessened in degree. So that one, I'm okay. But I don't think they will do it. To be frank with you, Dr. Yan, I don't think they will do it. I think they are repositioning more assets in the Philippines. Their Navy ships are there. Marines are also deployed in my country at the moment. There are troops also of the United States newly deployed in the country. So I don't think that will happen in that sense as what is going on in South Korea and Japan. Because I think from South Korea and Japan, the redeployment of their assets, troops are to the United States to reinforce the forces and the assets of the United States in the ongoing Middle East crisis. But on our side, I don't think that is really going on. On the other hand, what is the impact of the Middle East crisis when you talk about how do you call that?
The
The commitment.
MDT.
Yeah, the commitment of the United States as being a military ally through the MDT, the Mutual Defense Treaty. Something that needs to be clarified too, because I think some people don't understand the Mutual Defense Treaty, and even many Filipinos, they don't understand this. The Mutual Defense Treaty is not automatic. When you talk about retaliatory clause, or when you talk about so-called defense of the United States on the defending the Philippines as far as the United States is concerned, it's not automatic. In Article, I think, 4 of the MDT, in any case that the Philippines need some kind of assistance, militarily speaking, from the United States or vice versa, there will be a process. And the process is, it's based on Constitution and it's based on discussion in Congress. So it's not automatic. The MDT is not automatic that when we need help from the United States, may it be in the South China Sea or whatever military escalation that may happen, it doesn't mean that the United States will come to our rescue anytime soon. No, they will have the upper hand in making decision. They will make decision if they're going to help us or not. And it is in the Article 4 of the MDT. So this is even our concern as Filipinos, because on our side, if they demand something, it seems that we're tied up and then we respond and we give in to whatever demands they have. But on our side, if we are the one demanding, it based on legal premises of the articles of the MDT. This is what you call the not so balanced part of the MDT. So that is the reality, and that is there. Okay, so this is also our concern when you talk about the MDT. On the other hand, when you say if the MDT and the Americans will, as being projected by the Marcos government and the defense sector and the armed forces of the country, the Philippines has an ironclad relationship with the United States, given the Middle East crisis. If the United States still able to have that so-called deterrence, help for us in any kind of eventuality in the Indo-Pacific. Technically speaking, in paper, yes. In paper, it's there. So, you have the MDT in paper, legally speaking, it's there, that they should aid us. However, I think with the reality that is going on in the Middle East right now, I mean, it's really obvious already. It's a fact. The United States is having difficulty in the Middle East crisis. They're running out of ammunition. They're running out of missiles. They're running out of drones, and it seems Iran is winning. But of course, the United States will not admit these things. But many military strategies and defense strategies, even international relations scholars can see it already. So that is the problem of the United States. They're running out of everything, and it's costly to them. Billions of dollars are being spent in this war. And even right now, Trump already made a pronouncement that he wants 5-day ceasefire, as far as he is concerned. But Iranians said, it's not for the United States to tell us that we will have a ceasefire. It's not them who will decide when the ceasefire will happen. So you can see, it's because I think Trump already understands that they are not winning this war. So with that kind of context, the question if they can still aid us in terms of military and defense. But I think they have presence in my country. They have still the troops. They still have prepositioned assets and weapons. But I think in terms of what you call deterrence and in terms of really capacity and capability to be an aid to the Philippines, if in any case Philippines will face some kind of military actions coming from external force, I don't think that is huge as before, especially now that the United States is facing a lot of problems in the Middle East. And after this war, to be frank with you, Dr. Yan, after this war, analysis-wise, the United States will be crippled significantly and substantially when you talk about military might and even when you talk about economy, because the two are connected. Wars are being financed. It's not as if it exists. There is a cost to it. So I think they will be crippled. They will be, their capability will shrink, largely speaking, and it will impact how they're gonna protect, quote unquote, or how they're gonna protect and support their allies in the Asia Pacific region. And this pivot to Asia, I don't think it will disappear. It still be there, but I think in terms of credibility and in terms of strength, it will not anymore be pivot, but stretch to Asia. That's how I call it. It will not be pivot. It's like stretching too much, the United States military capacity. And I think this is something that the Filipinos and my country should think about. That, when you talk about alliance and when you talk about balance of relationship between major powers in the region, in the Asia Pacific region, we need to be strategic. We need to be very wise about these things because after the Middle East crisis, one thing that I can see, China will emerge as a strong military force. Actually, China, what I see in China is China will emerge as number one, a solid number one position in terms of economics, in terms of military. If we are wise, Filipinos are wise and Southeast Asians are wise, you need to balance relationship, especially for us, because our foreign policy is very much leaning to the United States, antagonistic towards China under a Marcos government. So we need to rethink, we need to have a shift and make it more balanced, make it more neutral and independent, I think. And in consideration to the geopolitics going on in the world and even in the region. And at the moment, I think Marcos Jr. is already having some kind of wisdom or some kind of enlightenment because in the recent reports that I've read today, it seems like Marcos Jr. is saying like we're open to negotiation to China. We're going
Yes.
we're going to talk to
Too.
China in the South China Sea in terms of this Second Thomas Shoal, the provision, and even he also pronounced that we're open to talk to China when you talk about oil and gas
In development.
exploration.
Yes,
Oil and gas
indeed.
exploration in the South China Sea precisely because of the energy crisis that we're experiencing at the moment. So there are this kind of pronouncement that Marcos Jr. is, speaking about. So I think he understands now the value of what you call neutrality, the value of independent foreign policy. Because before, I don't know what happened to him, but I voted for him, to be frank with you, because of this, that he will continue having an independent foreign policy and a neutral stance and a balanced relationship between the United States and China. But out of the blue, it just disappeared. He was under pressure of the United States. But now, with this crisis in the Middle East, everyone in my country realized the importance of neutrality, the importance of balanced relationship with major powers, especially United States and China, and the importance of being friends to everyone, being friends to China. Because at the end of the day, China is our largest trading partner. Imagine we import from China 40% of our supply of diesel. And now China already said like, we will not anymore export diesel because for your own survival. So I said, oh, you see? So now, there are a lot of discussion about this. There are a lot of realization in the Philippines. But for me, the most important really is the military bases of the United States. I would rather see a country like the Philippines to have a similar position like Vietnam, that it has four no's. No foreign military bases, no foreign troops, no siding with any major powers, and no participation in any kind of military escalation. I think this is a very wise policy of Vietnam, and I hope in a matter of time, our government and my country will adopt such kind of policy.
So you've seen the current Marcos government already feel the economic pressure from this war and already realized that there is a huge challenge the government is facing regarding this overseas Filipino workers and all of also the oil prices. And do you think the Marcos government is ready to prepare and do some preemptive measures for this economic reintegration if the war extends?
Oh, that is a big challenge, Dr. Yan. I'm telling you. Before the war happens, our economy is already problematic. We is facing a lot of issues in the economy. Of course, it's also because of the fact that there are a lot of political issues, like, for example, massive corruption in government is number one. So it affects the economy to a greater extent. So now with the Middle East crisis, the country is facing crunch. It's not, first is the issue of OFW. Many of our OFW already returned. Actually, many are returning because the war is escalating, and it's 24 days, and we don't know when would stop. So some of them are in the country, went back to the country. The challenge for the government is, first and foremost, how you're gonna reintegrate them, how you're gonna provide jobs for them. That is a big challenge. Second is, if many OFWs will return to the country, it would also to a certain extent impact the remittances, which contributes a lot to our dollar reserve. And dollar reserve is important at the moment because everything is so expensive, buying goods from the international market. And you need to remember, my country is an import dependent country. I'm not kidding, literally import dependent. Imports oil, import food, import even salt and even fish. We are an archipelago, but we import fish. So that's crazy. So it's really an import dependent. So now with the Middle East crisis, my country is facing a lot of economic issues. Energy is number one. So if you ask me if Marcos Jr. is prepared, he actually, it's so funny. He's a president, but it's very funny. He even said, like, it's very difficult to plan what to do because the prices of oil fluctuates every now and then. So that's his latest statement, when you talk about energy crisis. So that is the question now of many Filipinos. Is he capable of addressing issues, economic issues facing the country, compounded ones? What he gonna do? What is the plan? Because as far as we're concerned, we don't see any plan. How he will be able to mitigate economic issues, especially the prices of oil and the supply of our oil. Because from what I know, we will have, many Filipinos are afraid that by April 15, our supply will be off. So if the supply will be off, Philippines will be in dark. We will return to the Stone Age, because you need oil, you need gas, you need all of this
everything, for electricity, for everything.
For everything. And also, it's not only that. So that's another problem. So he's now trying his best to look for supply of oil. But at this point, everything is a crunch. And I even talked to a friend yesterday saying, like, so what is going on? Can we go to Russia for some concession in oil? But my friend told me it's so difficult because the supply is committed even before it was produced. Before the oil supply is produced, it's already committed.
Yeah, it takes time.
It takes time. You cannot just go them and go to them and tell them, like, we will buy. It's not like that. So the situation is really critical and crucial. So your question is the same question that I have, and your question is basically the question that everyone in the country is asking at the moment. I mean, I can see that the Marcos administration is trying its best, but I think it's very difficult precisely because when you talk about budget, because right now one of the solution is to provide subsidies to many Filipinos, especially the taxi drivers, the jeepney drivers, bus drivers, and all that. But the problem is like this. We have a deficit of 200 billion pesos when you talk about our 2026 national budget. So where are you going to get the money? Everyone in the world wants to have money. We already made a loan to the World Bank, around $800 million. So these are all problems, you put them together, crucial, difficult, and we're still asking, what is the plan, Mr. President? But the plan, it's the problem with Marcos Jr. is he's reactive to situation, but the proactive planning of how to mitigate the solution to the problems, economically speaking, that is not there. So right now everything is reactive. The focus of the Philippines, of the politicians and so-called leaders of my country at the moment, their focus is more on domestic politics, trying to prevent the vice president from running in 2028 rather than on mitigating the already immediate, crucial, and critical problems of the country, especially when you talk about energy supply. That is what is happening at the moment.
Yeah, so far I think the Hormuz car is indeed Iran's most important strategic card to play, during this
Yeah.
worldwide conflict. Its impact is not just to the Middle East, but also to the whole world. Energy
Mhm.
prices to every country, especially to Asia, because most of this oil are exported to Asian countries. So we're
Yes.
we're deeply involved. We're deeply affected by this Hormuz issue. So my final question is that to the Philippines, do you think should the Philippines deepen alliance with the US in the future or seek greater strategic autonomy to avoid being dragged into this kind of global confrontation?
Oh, thank you for asking that question because I've been advocating this for the longest time, almost 10 years of advocacy on my side, personally speaking, saying that the Philippines as a small country, we are small. We're not big. We're not, at the moment, to be frank with you, we're struggling with our economy. We're not wealthy like Singapore, Malaysia, even Thailand, even Vietnam. Because if you look at the rank in ASEAN, we're after Vietnam. I'm very afraid that maybe Cambodia will surpass us if we cannot solve our own domestic problems. So, as a small country that is struggling at the moment, we're trying to develop our economy. We're trying to, everything to survive. The best policy for us, to be frank with you, is not to side with any major power, not to side with anyone, but to be in the neutral ground and to have an independent foreign policy, genuinely speaking. And for me, really, I study Vietnam to a greater extent, especially now with my PhD dissertation. Vietnam is a case study on my side. I study their policy. I really admire Vietnam for being wise. And one of those things that I admire in terms of their foreign policy and military policy is again the four no's. No foreign military bases, no foreign troops, no siding with any major power, and no affiliation or your country will be used to favor one to attack another country. These are very important policy that I think my country should have in the future. And very important for us to have very good relation with China. Because at the end of the day, to be frank, China will be definitely number one in everything by the end of this Middle East crisis. That is already there. It's not anymore a question of, it's not anymore, and China rise is solidified already because of this Middle East crisis. The dominance of the United States it has been declining and it's now declining rapidly. So China will rise, its solid rise will be there, it's imminent. It will be number one economically speaking. It will be number one even militarily speaking. I think everyone knows. Those people who really thinks they know this. So for me as a country, it's very important to have very good relation with China. Not necessarily to be subservient of China, to be frank with you, but very good relation that it can constructive, that we can work with China economic wise, development wise, and we can agree on something that is workable when you talk about the South China Sea issue. I believe the Chinese are very pragmatic people, and your leadership is very pragmatic. I know that you will not force us to side with, for us to do things that we're not in agreement. But I think we can come up with a middle ground, especially when you talk about conflict of interest in the South China Sea, and also development activities in the South China Sea. Oil and gas exploration is very important. Fishery management is important. Trying to supply our troops in the second Tama Shoal is something that we need to discuss. And how to settle, the dispute that it will not escalate into something is very important. So I think this is important for the Philippines to reflect on. And I think hopefully the next government, we will have election in 2028. Hopefully whatever is happening right now, the lessons of the Middle East crisis will be considered in formulating the foreign policy of the next upcoming government in 2028, because we will have a national election soon. So everyone now is concerned with 2028. So these are lessons, and I hope my countrymen will learn, and I hope the so-called politician of my country will, at a certain extent, will have some kind of wisdom and drawn lessons from all of the experiences that we have at the moment. So for me, it's very solid. Foreign policy should be neutral, independent, balanced, good relation with China. I'm not saying that we will not be anymore a good friend of the United States, of course, and other major powers. But how this will be put into policy, because right now it's not like that, it remains to be seen. And hopefully the next administration will have this all recalibration so that my country will be in a proper place amidst the challenges of the world, in the world, and amidst what the geopolitics of the region. For me, really, one thing that my countrymen should really understand: relationship with China is very important for a country like the Philippines, and we should follow the steps of ASEAN member states. Many, as almost all except the Philippines, has good relation with China. I don't understand why in the hell the Philippines is like an odd country in ASEAN. I'm a Filipino, but I'm not blind to it. So hopefully that happens. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it, but I'm not sure, if
Yes,
this will happen. It depends on who will be the president of the in
exactly.
2020. It depends on the
Exactly.
president. Yeah.
Exactly, because I also see that, well, in recent years, the Marcos government is trying to involve in almost like all the possible confrontation involving China. For example, it increased its security ties with Prime Minister of Japan, Takaichi, and also tried to involve in this cross-strait issues with Chinese
Mm,
Taipei, as the security ties with Taipei, and also it involves more military drills with more
mm,
extra-regional countries. So I think
mm,
that I really appreciate your policy suggestion that the Philippines should stay neutral, keep its neutral status in the
mm,
region. But I think that the Marcos government is just moving towards the opposite road. So
mm.
let's look forward to
It's
the
always,
future.
yeah, it's always, Dr. Yan, it's always about who is the leader of the country. And I'm referring to the presidency. So hopefully we will have a more informed, with wisdom, and a leader that listens to people who understand these issues more. Your leader, you understand many things, but not everything, you know. So I hope that in the next administration, and we will have that, because I believe one thing that I believe, my country should really be independent, and we should focus more on our own domestic problems, rather than trying to be involved in Taiwan Strait issues, on other things. This is not our problem. Let these countries solve their own problem, and we have our own problem, and we focus and just be friends to everyone. So actually, I had an interview lately, and I told them, and I told in media in the Philippines, I said, you see, this Middle East crisis already tells us that being friends to all, being friend to China is very important. Now, still at the end of the day, they're talking to Chinese. They've been talking to the Chinese ambassador, in the Philippines, in Manila right now, about energy.
Maybe something's changing because you just already mentioned that the government, Marcos government, already proposing like a dialogue with China and also proposing joint development of oil and gas with China. So I think maybe something's changing slightly. Let's
Hopefully,
hope for the best.
yeah, because for me, really, what I want to see is a very good and functional relationship between China and the Philippines. There are a lot of Filipino Chinese in my country, and they want to see it. And it's for the good, for the benefit of both country. It doesn't mean that you're a friend of China, that you're subservient to China. No, that's not true. I don't believe in it. And I don't think China wants anyone to be under its control. I don't think so. It's not within the DNA of any Chinese or even of China, if you really understand its history as a country. So for me, hopefully our hopes will happen in a matter of time. I will be very happy. And I think, Dr. Yan, I will stop doing what I have to do. If I see that the relationship of the two countries, then I will rest.
Me too. That's our mutual hope. Well,
Yeah,
thank you,
hopefully.
Anna. Thank you for accepting our invitation and come to our dialogue again. So it's very pleasure to talk to you on this current on Middle East issue and also its relation to our regional countries. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yan, and have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.